Hello, everybody who's rolling in. We'll give it a moment for people to get in, and before we get started, feel free to introduce yourself and where you're from in the chat. Got people coming in from all over. And intro. Give it just another moment since the numbers are still rolling a little bit. Stabilizing a little at the moment, people keep rolling in, but why don't we go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming tonight. Talking about super blooms and after this wet winter and turning them into something you can enjoy longer and enjoy inside. We're gonna, for some quick housekeeping, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and to talk amongst each other in the chat. Use the Q&A for questions, and we will try to answer those as we're going through them and at the end if we have time as well. And we won't be doing taking raised hands during this. It gets just too chaotic with too many people potentially to speak, but we're glad to hear from you in the Q&A or in the chat. This is being recorded and it will be available afterwards, and you will also, if registered, be sent a link to the recording as well. So if you have questions, you'll be able to go back and take a look. And oops, that's cool. So I'm Anne Marie Benz. I am the Horticulture Programs Manager for CNPS. And Jen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Anne Marie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Aguilar. I'm the Education Program Coordinator with the California Native Plant Society. Thank you all for joining us here today. I see quite a few folks here from Los Angeles. That's where I'm from as well. So it's nice to see folks from my part of the town. Yeah, we're looking forward to a great presentation. And I'll turn it back over to Anne Marie.
Well, and our expert weighing in today, our best available expert, Jill. Thanks for being willing to come and talk to us about your love of native plants and these arrangements. So thank you very much.
Of course.
I'm going to stop share and turn it over to you now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and thank you to California Native Plants for inviting me. It's such an honor. I'm an attendee, as you know, a member as well as a presenter. So it's really fun to be here. And I just a little bit about me. I'm in the Berkeley Hills. That is where I'm beaming to you live. It's a little chilly here today, but I am the owner of Violet Ear Studio here in the East Bay, and I'm a native of California. What I love about sort of native plants, especially and sort of this engagement, is this kind of what brought me to become a gardening teacher. My original training is as a lawyer, and I think I always want to share that also because I often come with a PowerPoint and an agenda. I feel like it's helpful to know that that might be where it comes from. But I was a public interest attorney, my catchment area was Solano County all the way up to the Oregon border. So I noticed someone from Redding. I used to serve that area, and I came to rely a lot on my garden when as sort of my caseload increased, and I so much love the doing of gardening, but I also really love the sharing of gardening and helping people get started. So I started, sort of happened organically, no pun intended. I moved from teaching friends to sort of more formal teaching in both workshops and one-off talks, webinars like this. And so I teach both sort of horticulture and then also some, what I want to say, sort of like I don't know, botanical art kind of things, just sort of a way to allow people who might not have their own gardening space a chance to sort of still observe and be in the garden as much as they can. So things like flower pressing and that sort of stuff. So again, very, very happy to be here. So as promised, here's my agenda. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the history of sort of ornamental arrangements, just because I think it's fun, very briefly, and then again, bringing native flowers inside, and then the mechanics. So that's sort of the industry term for just the basic materials for arranging a bouquet. I think these are things, once we'll talk about them, it will make sense, but I think it makes it much easier to just to make something that you want to share. A little bit about conditioning, which is sort of how to make your flowers last, and then the flowers themselves. So here are some super blooms. So really briefly, the cultivation of ornamental and medicinal plants, sort of historically, originally, people believe that there was sort of, or historians believe that, anthropologists believe that there was a sort of hard stop. There's like a break between kind of hunter-gatherers, it goes into agrarian agriculture, and there's kind of two separate worlds, and that agriculture was solely for food production. But in fact, new research shows that during the hunter-gatherer period, cultures across the world actually cultivated ornamental plants. They weren't cultivating food plants necessarily, but ornamental plants, likely for religious ceremonies. And so I think that's really important to know, because it's sort of the idea of making a bouquet and sharing it with someone is actually sort of embedded in our human DNA. It's something that, again, preceded even a lot of like permanent societies and things like that. And so I think that's a wonderful, just a wonderful part of our history. And this also is sort of reflected in, again, millennia of development, but how flowers affect our brains. So the experience of nurturing something in your garden, or even having a flower presented to you, triggers the same dopamine and serotonin receptors and inhibitors as does familial relationships, familial love, and romantic love. And so again, I think it's just there's like a scientific reason for how you feel about flowers, which I thought was wonderful, and again encouraged me to sort of want to share this more widely. But again, the reason we have those same relationships, or the reason we have those experiences with people, is it because it helps our survival, right? It keeps our communities together, and keeps our society going. And so the fact that we have those same triggers related to flowers, I think, means that it's a very important part of kind of how we exist. And again, that's ornamental, not even just something, it's not just excited that we could eat it possibly. And then the last is the gift of flowers. And so this is research I learned about recently from in the wonderful book by Sue Stewart-Smith. She's a psychiatrist in the UK, and she talks about a recent study saying that the gift of giving flowers is actually it's sort of more positively rated and experienced by the receiver than any other kind of gift. It's like a higher, proportionate to sort of investment, a higher positive response and longer lasting. And so that sort of brings us to today, which is making arrangements either for your own home or to give away. And I think if anyone understands the importance of native plants, it is, of course, California Native Plant Society webinar attendees. But briefly, I think another sort of piece of that appreciation of flowers in this research indicates that when we find something beautiful, it actually teaches us to value it. And so it's sort of how we learn to value life. And I think that's really important to include native plants in our bouquets, because for people who aren't familiar with them, first, I think there's an unfortunate bias against using native plants. There's this expectation that they somehow don't work. You know, they're maybe because a lot of us have been disappointed by a California poppy before, but I have a trick for that. But I think when we share these native bouquets, it's a chance to really name a flower and show how beautiful it is and share its scent. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have done that in my own life, my personal and professional, where I've shared a flower and then soon I'm talking to the person about the name and how to grow it. And, eventually it's spreading. And so I think it's really, really important to do that with our native plants, because when we can get them into people's gardens and into people's lives, it benefits our whole sort of ecosystem in a wonderful way. So mechanics, I'm going to scoot my computer back a little bit so that you can see what my sort of desk space, just so you can see these. I feel like it's prop comedy, like Carrot Top, but I have some props. So I'm going to scoot this back and go like this. And let's see if you can see all of me. Let's see. One moment. All right. Okay, so when you're making an arrangement, obviously you will need some sort of vessel. I think before I learned these tips and tricks, again, the term is mechanics. It's what florists, floral arrangers will use when they're building a bouquet or an arrangement. I would have never used this, because obviously if you put something in it sort of naked, so to speak, it'll just pop right out. But that's why we have these little extra goodies here. And so I'm going to teach you just quickly how to kind of put them together. So again, you need some sort of vessel. This is one, it's just a regular bowl that a friend made. And then this is a very highly technical piece of equipment. This is a jam jar that can also be used. You can use something like this. Often this kind of vessel is really helpful because it has a smaller neck. But again, you don't have to be limited to that depending on what you're using. So you have your vessel. My next top tip is chicken wire. I use this a lot throughout my garden, so I always have this around. But what I do is I cut like a long narrow strip, then fold it in an S, and that just gives you something to sort of hold your plant in place. And again, what you'll see is that this gives you a lot more mobility, and again, just with the type of vessel you're using, and then what sort of plants you're using. The other thing that I love for native plants when you're using something like this is that it super sort of reduces the number of actual stems you need. So I think when we're talking about native plants, it's perfectly fine to bring a few inside, but obviously the majority you want for our invertebrate friends. And so this allows you again to use far fewer. The other thing that I think is lovely about it is that it gives you the opportunity to really observe how the plant lives and looks, and sort of recreate that in the bowl rather than sort of stuffing everything in and hoping that it doesn't make too much of a V in the center. I find this gives me a lot more, I can take some time to sort of observe the flower. And that's what I really love about arranging and any of those sort of activities that you're doing with flowers that aren't necessarily strict gardening, because I think it gives me a chance to observe in a way that I don't otherwise. And I always learn something about how a plant grows or something unique about it that maybe it's not something I can bring out in my garden consulting work, but is something that I sort of know is there. And it just kind of gives that extra elements, kind of extra dimensions to your plant. So chicken wire, this is sort of a funny one, floral frog. If you can see, it's like a pin. They make a lot of different types, but it's like a weighted piece and they have the sort of longer ones with pin tips. But basically this allows you to, let me see if I can take someone. So you see that you can like jam it in there. That's my dogwood. And it holds your piece in place. So you don't have to use all of these together, but some flowers or plants really benefit, sort of belt and suspenders from all of the pieces together. But again, use what you have, what works for you. This I've had for like 7 years and just have the one and, reuse it. I have a couple, but I use probably more one at a time. So I'm going to put this in here now because I'm going to use for this, as I'm talking through this for you today, I'm going to use the frog, and then I'm going to put the chicken wire on top. When you're using chicken wire, again, frog, you can just drop into anything. I could put it on the bottom of this and leave it there. Chicken wire is probably fine in something like this without anything like tape. but it's useful to tape in when you have something wide like this, because again, it sort of starts to stick out and then you have like put everything and then the whole thing comes out together. But you can also, if you don't want to deal with any of these other things, you can also just use tape on its own. And I used a sort of thick colored washi tape. This is, biodegradable paper tape. You can also use floral tape, which is plastic. Again, everyone has a preference in terms of that, but this will work perfectly fine. Again, a little bit thicker than normal, but I wanted you to be able to see it. You can make any sort of design on top, but again, the idea is just that it's going to be able to hold your flowers more upright. And again, that's with nothing. You can just add water after you put your tape in. So I have a different color here, again, just so in the hopes that you can see it. If you're going to use tape, always do your tape first and then your water, and really push it down hard. So I'm just showing you how this would work here. And again, the tape does two things. It holds your chicken wire in place if you have a vessel that sort of needs that extra help. And then it also gives a little more structure on its own. So here we go.
What you're doing is just under your thing. So
oh, forgive me. Hold on one moment. Better? Good. Yeah. A little higher?
It's on the desk. And it might be if you want to stop screen sharing while you're doing it a little bit too.
Oh, sure. Is that blocking it? Okay, hold on one moment. One moment. Oh, can you see that a little bit better?
Great.
Okay, wonderful. So this is so I just put the tape over. So I put the frog inside, the pokey thing. I put the chicken wire in its little S-shaped kind of bundle inside, and then I just taped it down. And again, that will hold that inside. When you're arranging, there's a lot of different oh, sure. Repeat what I was doing, the chicken wire. Sure. So I don't know if I can get it out. One moment. So here are the two tape pieces. So here's the chicken wire. So I've just cut it into a long, narrow strip, and then I fold it into like an S shape. If you can see that, it's a little hard to see, I think, but it's like that. And then it makes like a little basket. And then, so I put the frog in the base, and then I add my chicken wire, and then I add the tape on top. And again, the tape holds in this shape vessel because it's so wide that the chicken wire would sort of pop out once you start adding flowers. And so there's a lot of different recommendations for sort of how to think about the flowers that you add. Some people say, I've heard, what is it? Filler, thriller, and spiller. So like a sort of a wow, like a focal flower, something that spills over, which I definitely quite like. So I would include that. But I think whatever you are enjoying, try that. I always try to think about anything I'm doing as sort of like the garden, maybe not doing everything in repeat, like, rose and then something else around it, but more like a little bit of something over here, and then maybe it tucks to the same thing over here. So it's a bit of a range. But again, just to kind of show you how this would work here, I have my snips. 1 second, let me get some more dogwood. More dogwood here. So again, you when you have this sort of shape, rather than having it just kind of fall out the side, you can kind of weave it into your chicken wire and into your frog, and then it holds it much more easily. And so again, it kind of gives you, I just think it gives you, you can do a lot more with sort of smaller pieces, if that makes sense, which again is always nice when you're able to like save things. Let's see if I can change that camera angle. Hold on 1 moment. I'm trying to get this on here. Doesn't always work as you plan. There we go. Let's see what is that good? Is that a little bit better? So again, this is just trying to sort of show you how it fits in here. And I didn't add water on purpose. You would have added water after doing the tape, but that way I can tip it that way. And you can sort of see where it is. It will fall out if you totally tip it over, but it's pretty sturdy. And so again, forgive me, I'm not back in there. I knocked it out of this little spot here. There we go. So again, you're sort of weaving it into the holes created by the chicken wire, and the S shape hopefully kind of gives you a couple different layers. So it's not just like writing on the top, like a top layer, it sort of weaves in between, and really helpful with like branchy things like this. And so then, So again, then you sort of build. I'm going to talk about conditioning in a minute, which is sort of how you prepare the flowers. But just to show you again how you might build this out. Here's some Forget Me Not, California Forget Me Not, the Myosotis. And then when you have this, obviously you have some, I made this a little bit, I allowed this to kind of stick out a little bit again, just so you can see what I'm doing. But as you build, you kind of want to start to hide these sort of internal pieces. So it's really nice to use kind of short pieces, and you can sort of tuck those under, and that will eventually sort of cover the ankles almost. So little short things. These are just like those new tips on a live oak, and just sort of stuffing them in there and kind of low and deep. And then if you build like a little bed underneath, that'll kind of cover up the sort of what you're seeing. So I'm going to go back to my share just so that, pardon me, I'm reaching under this little thing so that you can see the next set of slides. Let's see. So, forgive me. Go back. So the other way to another option for you. I'm sorry, I'm like in the weeds here, quite literally. Another option is if you want something that's sort of to hold its form that you can travel with, you can do this. I have some dried flowers here, and you can. Let me get this. You can use twine or tape just to make, even wire, just to make like a loop around the middle, if you can see like that. And then that will also allow it to stand upright in a glass in a way that you wouldn't really be able to do it if it were loose, it would just kind of bell out. And so again, those are sort of again, and you can also use a rubber band for that. So let's see, I'm gonna move forward here. So conditioning, and I'm going to keep talking as I'm doing this. So conditioning, a key part is for the term conditioning is sort of like preparing your flowers. Just as sort of a what I'm going to say, like ecological gardener, like sort of thinking way. I try to time my cutting, what I'm cutting, for sort of more like the second flush, like lets things kind of start to come out, so that whatever invertebrate was waiting for it, like finds it and then start cutting. The timing for cutting though, morning is always best. The plant goes through transpiration, and so it's filled with water, and that will kind of keep it the freshest. If you can, as you're going out in your garden, use a set of snips or scissors and do what is called cut into water. And so when you make your snip, you're walking around with like a jar of water and put your water in. And I'm sorry, I just noticed a question. And so yes, and then if you can, so cut into water, place it in a cool resting space if you're not going to be using it immediately. Again, it is stressful for the plant to be cut like that. It gives it a chance to kind of collect itself. Another great tip is stripping leaves. So I have some, this over here. So that's kind of like a big piece, right? And anything that's going to be below the water line will start to kind of degrade, and that can gum up your the sort of almost like the vascular system of the plant. And so these you can trim off or snip off just until you get to sort of where your water line is going to be. And you can also, with something like this, because again, it is so like meaty, if you want to make it almost more of like an individual flower, just trim these off. And then again, you can have, it gives you a lot more flexibility again with like the type of plant that you're using. And then, so if you can, just do like a quick recut before you put something in the water. I know I wasn't doing that. And then I'm going to skip searing for now and just talk about changing water. Changing water, if you can, like every 2 days, what I do is I just like tip everything out gently, and use that to feed my potted plants or water my potted plants, and then refill with some fresh water. I'm going to talk quickly about searing. So searing is, the idea is that you are going to open up sort of, again, this like vascular system of the plant by dipping it in hot water. And so what you would do is, if I had water, again, I didn't want to do it right in front of the computer, you would bring a pot of water to boil, then pour in just like a couple inches, and then you'd hold your stem in for like anywhere from 10 to 25 seconds. So this is really thick and hard. I would do that on the long end when I do California poppies, and this is the tip to stop them from wilting. They don't last super long no matter what, but the tip to keep them from wilting, this is closed up because it's nighttime, is more like 10 to 15 seconds. So again, dip them in the water, take them right out, put them in cold water, and that really opens up again these sort of capillaries. And so I'm sorry, I'm just reaching around to get to the system. And so again, hopefully will give you the most access to, okay, good, I'm glad you can see. Give you the most access to give it rather the most access to the water. And I'm sorry, I was trying to catch up on the questions. If Anne-Marie, if you want to jump in and let me know if there are any pertinent ones for now, let me know, or if I missed anything. And so again, yeah, so the dipping, that's called searing. And again, I do it with everything. I think I probably don't always cut first thing in the morning, but that searing really extends the life of the plant. And again, I think it's helpful because you don't have to keep redoing something, but also because you're, saving as you're sort of reducing the number of plants that you're using, and sort of keeping the most in your garden. So sort of, more bang for your buck, I suppose.
Do you think all plants benefit from searing, or?
Yeah, I think the only ones I don't do it to usually are the bulbs, like a sort of bulb plant, and they just don't tend to need it. I don't, usually you see that like anything that has like that sappy, like thick sappy nature, they tend to not need it. They don't seem to dislike it, but I don't think it's necessary.
Great.
So yeah. And even it's amazing, even like the woody things you would think like a rose. I have, obviously they're not blooming right now, but just the wild rose is I was going to offer it as a foliage option here. Even that, you think it's so woody, it wouldn't benefit from something like that, but it really does. It just again gives it a longer life, and then and also yes, this is the year where it doesn't matter as much, but on a warmer day it definitely especially inside I think it helps them sort of drink, as it were. So let me hop back on here. And then, so any other questions about this process? Again, you can talk about like focal flowers, all the sorts of things. Focal flowers when you're working with sort of, not to say not that natives don't have focal. Like, I mean, again, the ceanothus, you could cut that down. It would be a really big like eye pull. Same thing with the California poppies. When they're open, when it's sunny, they're dramatic. I do, though, I think I gravitate towards something that's a little bit softer, just because I do love these flowers and they tend to be a little bit smaller, but you can kind of make that like wow factor by grouping, so if you have a couple Clarkia together, that gives like a bigger sort of color look. And if you put those kind of in two spots next to each other, you can sort of make that a similar sort of look and feel as it were.
And so how would you define searing, just real quick?
So searing, again, that's just that dip in hot water. So boil some water, pour it into a glass, or any sort of, any vessel that can take heat. You don't need much of it. You only want to get that without that much of any stem in there, and then dip the stem in, and then depending on sort of the laxity of the stem, so something sort of soft like this, I would do much less, like more like 10 seconds. And then something woody like this, like the dogwood, the cornice, I would do more like 20-25 seconds. And so I think, yeah, not to say that like something thinner would like melt, but it sort of doesn't need that level of heat on it. And I think it sort of starts to actually detract from the strength of the like cell walls if you have it in there for too long. So yeah. So now we get to go to plants. So I'm gonna move this down and scoot you a little bit forward so I can go faster through the slides. There I am, and there you are. Pardon me for that. So plants, this was, my criteria was, I was trying to find things that I definitely, I know to do well in a vase, that were relatively, that could be grown in a pretty wide range, since I know people are coming from all over, and also are relatively like widely available, you know, so it's not something that's super, super obscure. That narrowed it to about like 2,000 plants. So this is an entirely arbitrary list of just things that I like. And I was trying to keep myself to 3, and I think everything has like 1 like asterisk extra 4th. So my apologies. This PowerPoint looks like my garden, which is probably a little bit overfull. Bulbs. Bulbs are really beautiful in a vase. These are the 3 that I chose, and I'll go through them each individually. But I can share the the list with you all later. So California fawn lily, the erythronium. I added the Tuolumnense also because it's a little bit. The Californicum likes slightly cooler, slightly wetter temperatures. And the Tuolumnense, it's a little bit more of like a yellow color, but it can do like a more of a true summer dry. But really, really beautiful in the vase. And again, if you're using these sort of, mechanic systems, you can really recreate that beautiful sort of bell dipping shape, which I think is so gorgeous. So really lovely in the vase. I also love wild hyacinth, the Dipterostemon. It has a really lovely full flower. So again, it kind of gives you what I would say, like almost like a ranunculus or something, that like fuller, bigger look. So I would say that's a focal flower if you want to do sort of call things focals and fillers and things like that. And they grow really, really readily and easily. And then the Tritolea, pretty face. This is I'm forgetting the this is Ixioides, there's another that's blue, a Tritolea that's blue, and I'm forgetting the name suddenly, but it's sort of similar in shape. It almost would be like a combination of the 2 of the hyacinth and this in terms of like star shape of blue. But I just love this for that detailing, almost like purple veining on each petal, and then the purple on the bud is gorgeous. And I think it just brings out sort of a lot of those like almost purpley undertones in other flowers, which can be really lovely. Obviously color is a key factor whenever you're arranging something. And while we don't probably have time to talk a lot about color, I always encourage people to check out a color theory book from the library. It's sort of amazing what you'll sort of what you learn about what you're sort of excited by when you look at different colors and are sort of combining them. So these are my annuals. This was, I guess, a much larger asterisk. This was or any, but the reason I added this list at the end was because there are so many annuals that are really, really local. Like the Physalia has like 7 different varieties or something, and so you can really get like super local to your area, and so try that out. I think that's really fun. And so the first, the Lacy Physalia, this is, I think sometimes it's called scorpion flower, but it's just such a cool look. It has this curly Q. You don't quite see it as well in this picture on my profile. It has this curl and fluff, really beautiful. It's also a lovely ground cover. So if you have some soil that needs healing, you can grow this and pick it, which is wonderful. Another like that are clovers. Clovers have beautiful, beautiful flowers, kind of more in the mauve family, and they're really lovely all together. And again, have that same capacity to kind of be a wonderful ground cover. And let's see, so, and just as an example, again, that sort of, the Physalia has more of like a more bendy stem. So again, that's, if you're searing it, that's more like the 10 second mark. As opposed to longer. Lupin feels almost like, of course, everyone has lupin, but it's just my absolute favorite. I think it does everything. It has color, it has scent, it fills out really beautifully, especially again when you're able to like bring it upright, and then really easy to collect seeds, so you can kind of put it wherever you want to in the garden. So I think it's a wonderful option. I was joking that mine I'm like at the top of the hill, mine haven't started blooming yet, but a little bit lower than me they are, and I was like, fair to borrow some, but I didn't, I promise. So this is the woodland Clarkia gracilis and the subspecies Tracii. I love this Clarkia. I think some people don't like Clarkia because they think it's a little almost too loud. I think this is really a beautiful sort of woodlandy look, and has a lot of flowers, beautiful colors. Again, that's sort of the way your eye gets drawn to that deep center is gorgeous. I also get some complaints about Clarkia being too short, like sort of not getting to the top end of its growing capacity. And so my recommendation, if you're having that experience with any plant, is give it some competition, like a neighbor that it needs to grow up over, and then you can get some really long stems on that. So if anyone's having problems with their Clarkia, that is my fix. So perennials, this is I have two asterisks. I'm sorry, guys. I have a verbena, a verbena, a helenium, and then a buckwheat. I also added the Heuchera maxima because I think it's so beautiful. The foliage is beautiful. It's also has can do both shade and sun. It only has single flowers, but it will they'll stay on for a really long time. So they're lovely both in the vase for that reason and in the garden. And the Sanguisorba officinalis, I just think it's so beautiful, but it's a little bit wetter. If anyone's interested in that flower, I'm happy to talk about how I grow mine without adding water. But it's it's maybe doesn't work everywhere. So let's get to pictures. So this is the verbena, and it's really beautiful. It can also handle some shade, like dappled shade, really, really floriferous. And I think it has a great capacity, both when you're thinking about sort of your arrangements, whether it's a narrow glass or a wide one, whatever you're using. Again, that's sort of like covering the bottom. You can cut them sort of short and tuck them in there. And then it's like, it sort of cover, I need to stop moving this so much. It can sort of cover everything really easily. And so in a really beautiful way. So I love it for that reason. And then the helenium, I'm worried that this might be a like love it or hate it, because I really love it. And often when I give talks, I will encourage people to purchase it. And I'll have like 2 people come up and say like, I want only this in my garden, and then like no one else. So I don't know. You tell me if you like this. But it's really beautiful. It has a lot, like sort of a low mounding growth. And then these long, small, it's almost like just like the center of a Rudbeckia or a helenium or something like that. But again, with this little dust of pollen, and the color is so beautiful. And in an arrangement, it does this wonderful, sort of floaty movement, adds texture, adds such a different shape. So I love it. It's so easy to grow. It blooms probably like 11 months out of the year, maybe 10, and really, really easy to grow and care for. And so I think it's just fantastic. And I love it both like because it's so floriferous. You can take just a handful in a vase, or you can again do sort of like a few little like floaters, which is really beautiful, sort of like almost like a lightning bug or something like that. So Eriogonum, any buckwheat will be perfect for both a garden and a vase. They have so many flowers. They look beautiful throughout the year, especially in their kind of like slightly faded colors. I just love this sulfury color. It's not considered a double, but it's almost a double. And I'm sure you all know when you get into like the doubles, that's usually the nectaries are the ones that kind of give you that extra petal. And so there is either none or less nectar. And so this is a lovely way of getting that like poof without actually like doubling out the flower. And so, yes, I think this is a wonderful option for any garden, and it kind of grows everywhere. And again, there's sort of one for every zone. So vines are really, really spectacular in an arrangement. It gives you that length. I think this is sort of when you think of like a beautiful, like a wedding bouquet or even arrangement, sort of like a professional one. That's like part of it is that like elongated stems and sort of the falling nature, again, which you can achieve because you've sort of stuck it in there tight at the base, but vines can give you a lot of really just beauty for that look. So these are my 3. So the Virgin's Bower, this clematis does multiple things. It has beautiful scent and can be used for its flower, but I almost love it more in sort of its senescence as it kind of makes these seed pods. That's one sort of like the midlife version of it, where it has sort of green and sprouty, and then it gets like totally fluffy fuzzy. And when it does that, you can cut it in like you can cut it long and put it in arrangement, but it's also really fun when you're pruning to cut it long and then loop it into a wreath. And then it has this like fuzzy, you can add some things into it, but it's really, really beautiful, kind of cloud-like. So I think it's great because it has kind of all season interest. Same thing with the California grape. Can never, I don't think, again, I've ever given a talk without Vitis californica involved. It has, again, the leaves are beautiful, both when they're green, but I almost love them more when they're red. And they are beautiful in arrangements, especially I tend to use those like those smaller end, I mean, like at the tail end of the plant, smaller pieces. And then if you do get grapes, those are also lovely in arrangements. You can cut them a little bit smaller if it's too big, but they're beautiful also. And again, you can use the vine at the end of the season as your wreath base and make it both totally compostable and totally native, which is exciting. Pink honeysuckle, I don't know if people think that this is sort of like a dippy plant. I don't know, someone the other day was like, oh, Lana's there, like whatever. But I think it's wonderful. It has beautiful scent. It has such a soft, lovely color, and as compared to, and maybe they sort of were, against honeysuckle in general, as opposed to those sort of behemoths, you can really see kind of, your other plants through the native honeysuckle. And so I think it's lovely. And again, I think that color can't be beat, that yellow into pink. There's no cultivar that like matches that color way, if you will. So I have another asterisk here, and it's the California red bush, the Cercis occidentalis. I gave it an asterisk because I think I actually see a fair amount of it, so maybe it's not special, but I wanted to just mention it because it's so beautiful in the vase, especially because the actual, now I'm going to take it out and, it won't come out. If this were the red bud, it has buds all along the stem. So you can like take individual pieces and again, put them really, really low in, and that can be really lovely. And then, so I'll go through the other three. So again, and also it has, I just love the leaves. I love that it has sort of all season color. So it can be used again throughout the season. So flannel bush, I love Fremontodendron. I don't think people use them enough. They grow beautifully. And then in a vase, they have the leaves, it's like the silver foliage on one side and then the dark green on the other. The color is beautiful, and the flower, the blossom itself stays well for a while, but then the calyx itself it kind of has that like dusty brown of almost like a magnolia leaf, and so you can use it dried. You can like kind of keep it on, and the foliage will stay, and then you have those like, they almost look like a flower in themselves, but like a brown, which I think is gorgeous. And again, grow really easily. Flannel bush can be pruned, and I think some people think that they're just like wild and will only grow on your own, but you can absolutely kind of manage how it grows. And then the dogwood. Pacific dogwood, this is obviously there are a couple different versions in California. Cornus natalii is my pick, and I don't think I need to say anything other than this. This picture speaks for itself. Such beautiful shape and color. They're so plentiful even on a not wet year, on a not super bloom year, and then you have that kind of almost like beady. Keep using this as my prop. That beady little bud, and so again you can keep cutting it, use it for its blossom, use it for that little almost like berry, and it's really lovely throughout the year. And then desert peach, like any prunus, again it has this great sort of arc of its growth. You can force them inside and bring those blooms out early. Enjoy the blooms. I always love when you have like the blossom plus leaf, and then they have a little bit of color, but not a huge amount. But the peach itself, the fruit itself, is so lovely in arrangements. Again, you really want to use that. I would say, not to say you have to use these tools, but make sure you're using something to like secure it in, like do extra tape or use a flower frog if you're doing that. And then, so shrubs, a few more, again, trying to kind of, starting with a broad lifestyle, wild rose was my asterisk. Only because I don't know why I don't consider it a shrub. I guess it is. It's mound forming. It's shrubby, but I still sort of think of it a little more as like a climber. I don't know if that's right. But the flower. The other reason I didn't want to include it is because one of my favorite things about the Rosa californica is the blossom itself doesn't last super long. Although once the petals fall, you still have the sepals and they're quite lovely. But that if they form fruit in your area, then that is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful decorative, sort of piece, and the leaves may even defoliate, or you can remove them and you have those rose hips, which are so lovely. So that's why I included it. But again, it doesn't do it everywhere. Oops, doesn't do it everywhere. So I gave it an asterisk. So here are my 3 for you though. So the blue elderberry, again, normally I would say any Sambucus is great, but I love the Sambucus mexicana cerulea because of this specific color. That blue is so gorgeous. It has this really like the movement both in a vase or in your garden of the foliage is really lovely. Those pinnate leaves. The flowers are gorgeous. They're big, cloud-like, smell wonderful. You can make cordial out of them. And then the berries, again, you can either use them in that green, like sort of hard greens form that you can see here, or in the blue. These, obviously, if you get like a really heavy bunch, I often like trim them down. So I sort of make like something a little bit smaller and more delicate, just so that it's not like taking over everyone. And then the mock orange, again, Philadelphus, I think you can't go wrong with. It's also both the Sambucus and let's see, the mock orange and the cornice, the dogwood, are all understory. So they all can handle, being overshadowed a little bit, like some dappled shade. And this, I think, has some of the best blooms and scent. It doesn't have as long of a life. It doesn't sort of do the, color into berries or anything, but again, really beautiful blossoms. And then last, you can't forget a ceanothus. I like this varietal just because it has the longer sepals. And I find also, I think also misunderstood slightly, ceanothus does very well in dappled shade. And I actually think it does, it can really extend the, as it reaches for the light, as the plant reaches for the light, makes it really delicate. Sometimes they get a little like, too kind of like rough in the sun. Rough, I don't know, hunkered down. And while that can be lovely, I think this form, when you can cut them sort of long, is also fantastic when you're designing. So yes, let me just pop out of the screen share so I can answer questions. Hold on one moment. Stop share. All right, let's see. Desert peach, yeah, drought tolerant. And then let's see, Oh yeah, definitely don't steal plants. Oh no, you should not steal plants. I was joking. I thought about it, but I wasn't actually going to do it. And then
well, and with that, there was a question from a couple people about the giving away California poppies, ones that are in their yards, because there's actually a mistaken belief that you can't pick poppies.
Right. I held that belief till I was like very much an adult.
You absolutely can pick poppies if they're on land that you have access to or the right to pick flowers from. Like everything else, remember habitat value, and that you want to, make sure that they will reseed themselves in those areas.
Yeah. And I would say for all of these plants, especially, again, the poppies I have, there was like the prior owners of my home had like a new build, so everything was like totally flat. So I actually purchased seeds from our watershed nursery, but I sort of treat it almost like, if you're allowed to forage in an area, like, 1 of 20. So I sort of count out how many there are, and that's like the likelihood that they will seed again. Mine are very happy in that sense. So yeah, so I do take a couple.
Yeah. So if you can grow your own super bloom.
Yeah.
Do ceanothus make good cut flowers?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I don't know if it's only the if it sort of like, I've never tried cutting it without conditioning it. But I find, yeah, they're lovely. And again, sometimes it's just a little bit like heavy. Right, like it's like a lot to have in one. And so what I tend to do is I strip down those lower pieces and put them in like a little bud vase, and then I have just like the top and kind of, yeah, sort of like almost prune it in on my desk. Because yeah, I think they can be like, seem like a little bit big. Flannel bush, it blooms for a few months, but again, I love what is left by it. You know, again, you have the foliage and you have those sort of the calyx, and so it almost looks like another flower, like a sort of light brown flower. And so that's why I included it for in sort of the longevity section. But a month or two is pretty good for a tree blossom.
What do you find the vase life to be for Eriogonum?
Eriogonum, I think I've always found it to be really long. Like I don't know that I have a stopwatch on it, but it's one of those that I will not only like transfer from arrangement to arrangement, but I'll even I forget that the water has all disappeared in it, and it's just like sitting there, and it will sort of dry in situ. So I think those are the sort of maybe even like the longest, especially if you get them a little bit later in the season. And I should say, I mentioned this earlier, but just to repeat it, what I try to do is either let sort of one generation of the plant blossom and give it a few days open, so that, you know, my pollinators and everyone else who is investigating it get a chance to visit and then pick it. You wouldn't do that if you were like selling the flower. You'd want to pick it sort of like just on opening, depending on what you have. But the Eriogonum, I definitely let go pretty long, because I almost feel like as it like starts to dry, I really like the color. And then it seems to like almost be like sort of in this like in between long lasting space.
Nice.
Yeah. And again, nice that everyone gets to visit.
Well, and we had somebody put an interesting one in the chat, flowering manzanita.
Oh yes, yeah, that was, again, I was hoping people would ask questions. Manzanita is absolutely wonderful. I figured you all wanted to eventually have your dinner. But yeah, it's beautiful. All of the anything that you are attracted to in the manzanita family is fantastic. Again, I just recommend, I think it's easier to work with if you kind of like make a little sort of matrix for yourself to stick it into. But yeah, fantastic. And the other thing that's nice is there's so many flowers that while it drops, you know, they don't individually last super long. There's so many on each sort of bunch almost that you don't like miss them. So yeah, I think that's a lovely option. And, you know, again, a few of them are scented. And I think it's one of those plants, almost like ceanothus, where you don't really notice that as much in the ground, but when they're inside, then you can actually like smell that sort of honey smell.
So we have someone who had experience that the grape leaves will wilt after you cut them. Does searing kind of cure that?
Yeah, so I find, and now granted, sometimes you just don't, it's like, is it the day? Is it the, you know, what's going on that it won't? But yeah, I find searing really works. The other thing you can do is almost like lightly press them, and then it kind of keeps them from like collapsing, but you can press them and then put them in water, and that can work also. Again, I think always easier to use the smaller leaves. Because they tend to just be like, I don't know if it's the connection to the stem or what, but they tend to be a little bit more sort of turgid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for clarification, for searing, if you're boiling the water,
yes,
are you doing it while it's still boiling, or are you kind of taking it off?
Taking it off. So again, boil it, you know, take it off the heat, no bubbles. You don't even have to bring it to a full boil. It can be, you know, just off a boil, as they say. Pour it into your vessel. And I do that because generally what I'm using for boiling is like bigger, and there's like a lot of steam escaping. And I think that there's like some people practice it where like stick plants in and leave them there. I've never found that to be successful. So I transfer it, dip it, hold it, and then like put it right into cold water. So it's away from the heat. So it's not like coming up into the blossoms, because I don't think they want that. It's again, you're trying to open up like almost like the capillaries, the cells of the capillaries of the stem, so that it can kind of keep drinking. And that's again why if you have an arrangement, the ways to make them last the longest would again be changing the water, if you can, even recutting them, researing them if you're like really serious. Well, I don't think I've done that like twice. And then also keeping them in a cool room. So if you have like an event, you've made something and you have to make it a couple days before the event where you want, to display them. If you can keep it in a cool space, like outside of sunlight, that will all go a long way to help your plants last. Again, just like this season, which is so much colder for us, it's amazing what has been lasting in the garden, without that heat.
Yeah. And what hasn't come up yet, because we haven't had any of that heat either.
Exactly. Yeah.
Could you explain about the nectaries and how they correlate to a flower being double?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So when a breeder is selecting, sometimes you get a plant, just like I'm sure you've all had this if you're poppy growers, you'll have like the white version thrown. So that in theory you would, if you wanted that seed, you cultivate it, and sometimes they'll kind of go back and forth, like you'll get some orange and some white. If you are breeding, you might see or intentionally cross flowers that have like a few more petals. You'll see like them start to get petals, and it's the nectary that is doing that. It's like throwing. It's there are ways to do it intentionally, and with crossbreeding or hybridizing. But if you can even see it, so occasionally you will see one that actually does have like a little bit of a ruffle, and so then a breeder will keep working that one set of seeds, recrossing it until it gets those extra doubles. And so when you have everything, like, yeah, exactly. It's like and I think like hollyhocks, you can really see it looks like a carnation almost, when it's like it's double, but it's like quadruple. And so that those both, it's hard for like a bee or another pollinator to get inside, to get deep in there, even if there is anything left. But also they're just far fewer, because that is often the site at which the like extra petal is coming out of. So you sort of lose that in order to get the petal. And as with everything, if there's something that you love, you have to have in your garden and it's a double, just plant, some other things and balance it out.
If you were going to kind of sum up the principles of designing a bouquet,
Mm-hmm.
do you have kind of a quick?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't like to be too prescriptive, because again, it just sort of depends on what you're working with. But what I like to do, if I can, is sort of think about, as I'm sort of in the garden, I think about height. You want some up, some middle, some low. Just like a garden, you don't want everything to be the same height or sort of the same style, shape, not everything stiff. I love anything that grows a little bit wonky or wiggly. If I don't get that from the actual flower, I love to use like a vine to do that, or even like, again, that long piece, even these little, again, those like sort of soft pieces of the like new growth on the oak, does so much more than the oak does, normally just like kind of pokey and straight. So I also think about color, colors that work together, or sometimes contrasting, gives you even more pop. So where was I have these two, right, are going to give you like, that's like a lot of drama, but you can also do monochromatic, where everything's kind of different shades of the same color, which can be really, really lovely. But again, so that's sort of your color piece, sort of how things are working color wise, how things are working height wise. And again, I don't know if the term would be like shape or movement, sort of stiff things, again, your branches with some things that are soft and floaty. And so that's, again, rather than saying like filler, spiller, blah, blah, only because, and that's helpful, I think. And the terms again were filler, like sort of like a bunch of little things, right, that you sort of aren't like super drawn to. Thriller, which was like your focal, your kind of wow. And then spiller, something that moves down. Again, I would sort of add something maybe up too, but the idea is just to kind of get you thinking about sort of three-dimensional, so it's not just like a little mound you're kind of doing. I think that makes it a much more interesting arrangement. And again, that allows you to do two of something rather than having a whole, handful. So those are, I think, the key principles. And again, just what you like, I always want to add scent in, which, no photograph will capture, but I know it's there. But that's, that's sort of one of my favorite things about the garden is scent.
Get that full immersive experience.
Yeah.
Well, we had talked about it briefly before we opened everything up, that CNPS will probably be doing a version of our Wreath Masters this year. And so you had said you use, what do you use for the base of your wreaths? Just
So I use my California grape. So just you can strip off the leaves or leave them on and they'll kind of dry again, on the vine. But it's so fun to have the little curlicues, whether you've unattached them or not, because it just like adds so much. And I'll just cut a long length and then wrap it. And I do sort of a oh, I guess I can maybe use strip this low. I truly just work it into a knot like that, but big. And then I'll have like a longer tail and then just keep threading that over. So like loop through, and then add as much, however big or not big I want it, just add a couple more lengths. And again, you have all the little curlies sticking off, you can trim or not. And then that becomes the base. And then I like to use just like a cotton twine. So again, it's totally compostable. You can also use wire, which I guess technically would eventually devolve, or you can, rewrap it up. And so then I just, it's just because we're all here and I can show you, so you take, your dry pieces or pieces that can stay on and kind of make like almost like little boutonnieres, and then using twine, hold that on and then like wrap it onto each piece. But I'm also happy to demo that one day for you guys. if you'd have me back. But yeah, that's sort of the process and then the other one that I love to use is truly any vine will work. As long as it won't like get too mushy, as it dries. The other though that's wonderful is the clematis. And again, what I think is so fun is if you can capture the seed heads in it, it almost is like a built-in, you can just use it on its own, or same thing as you like wrap and kind of wrap it around, you can then feed pieces in. And I think those ones are really lovely as like a loose style.
Well, thank you so much.
Very wonderful.
It's been a really great presentation. I know we didn't get to all the questions, thoughts that were there, but there will be an email with resources at the end, and we'll try and get a couple of good pictures of different bouquets.
Oh yeah.
Big Ash last year, we got some beautiful things out of that. So we'll get a couple of things together, and this is recorded, so you can come back and watch it. And thank you so much, Jill.
Yeah. And again, happy to answer questions, as they come in later too.
All right. Well, we appreciate you and have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining.